Okay, people. So, if you've been a long time enjoyer of the podcast, you know who the hell we got right here. You know who we got. Now, if this is the first time, shame on you. But today on Echo Chamber, we have got the great Johannes Grenzfurthner. Sorry, Johannes. I apologize.
Not bad, not bad. Actually, it's not a th. It's just a t. It's just like some weird medieval way in German to sometimes you spell the T with an H, but it's not a th, it's just a T. It doesn't. So the correct Austrian German way to pronounce it is Grenzfurthner. That's the one.
Grenzfurthner.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, splendid.
Well,
Johannes,
actually,
thank
there's a fun story to it. So
you.
my name really actually means, so the first, like a grenz is a border, and a
Mhm.
Furte is kind of like a shallow creek or ford or something like that. So technically in English, I'm Johnny Border Forder or something like that. So that's what I am. But enough with that.
Oh man. Hey, we were just saying, right? Because in my head, I was thinking we must have spoken in 2020, right? It must have been 2020 because that's when Masking Threshold was out,
Yeah.
which was tearing up the festival scene, winning awards, changing the whole narrative of horror and docs and all of that, right?
Yeah.
So if you're coming with a new film, yeah, it must have been 2020. But no, it was November last year,
It
Johannes.
was November last year. I would guess if I would have released Masking Threshold in 2020, I couldn't have spoken with you from North Carolina. I would have been banned from traveling to the US because of COVID and all that stuff. But
That's
but I mean,
true.
you're completely right. It's kind of like 10 months or something that we spoke about Masking Threshold, and and I can't believe my new film is out.
Mm.
There's something weird. This is a weird timeline I'm not used to.
Oh man, yeah, because like Masking Threshold was correct. Yeah, but you were in North Carolina, and I remember as well, you went to I think another festival stateside because you bumped into my friend Matt Hugh Holes out there.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I think that was at Cuckoo Festival. I think because I'm
Yes.
pretty sure. Yeah, yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That would have
Absolutely,
been that. Yeah.
absolutely. No, it was lovely. It was. I mean, it was the time when festivals were opening up again. I mean, I remember last year in September when Masking Threshold was screened, had premiere at Fantastic Fest. Fantastic Fest was, I mean, 2 weeks before Fantastic Fest, they didn't know if Fantastic Fest will happen in the physical space last year. So
Mm.
it was really like all crazy still, and there weren't that many international guests because most of the people needed a special visa to get into the US. So I remember that it was a good thing because you sit around there are not that many guests, and you chat with people at the bar, and then you realize, oh my God, that's just the CEO of Neon Pictures or something like that. Like it was strange. There were not that many guests, but quality wise, it was super super interesting to be there and be able to talk to so many people because usually you have like hundreds or thousands of people and you can never talk to everyone. And,
Mm.
and back then it was super super exciting. But just like 2 months later for Cucalores Festival in November, there were already like way more people from Europe coming to the US, and it was the time when the festivals kind of like started to kind of like start again. Let's call it that way. So, and we'll see. Like in 2 weeks, I will be in Austin, Texas again for Fantastic Fest this year, because my film will again have premiere at Fantastic Fest.
Nice.
And so we'll see. I'll see the difference between the
Mm,
2021 and the 2022 Fantastic Fest.
that would be interesting, man. That would be interesting. So, how the hell do you get a new feature out so quickly? Like, what
Okay.
happened there?
Okay. So what happened was that on the 31st of January this year, like really like the most stupid like cliche you can have, I took a shower. And while taking a shower, I had this idea. And the very same day I started writing the script. The script was finished 2 weeks later, and the entire film was done mid of June. So
What?
between the 31st of January and mid of June, I made a feature film. And I submitted it to Fantastic Fest, and they took it, and a couple of other film festivals already also accepted it, and I'm super happy. And it just out of nowhere. I mean, of course, like if you're an artist or a creative person, nothing like comes out of nowhere. So there were, of course, fragments of the
Mm,
idea or some interests already floating around in my head, probably for a long, long, long time. And there was one uh, thing that happened in November 2020 that a friend of mine came to Vienna uh, to be our artist in residence. So the backstory is, so my name is Johannes, and I'm part of this art collective, an art group, but we're also a film production company in recent years. And so our main headquarters, they are at Museums Quarter, and Museums Quarter is this wonderful kind of like art complex, pretty much like right in the center of Vienna. And usually, if you have such art spaces, uh, it's most of the time just like museums, like the
mm,
Museum of Art History and the Museum of Modern Art or whatever it is. In the case of the Museums Quarter in Vienna, uh, it's not only kind of like the mausoleums of art, but they're also around 60 art groups and creative agencies and people who are contemporary players and makers in that space. So we have our small office there, and there are, there, for example, next door there is an institution uh, dealing with documenting art in Austria, and next door there is a little game development studio who they create board games and stuff like that. So there are lots of different interesting little groups or initiatives, and which makes it super interesting because
mm,
it's not it's there's something happening there, yeah. And it's also subsidized, so we can actually afford it, so we're not paying that much rent to have like a little office in the center of Vienna at this super prestigious art institution, and all of that is great. And one of the side effects is that we can every now and then we can invite people to Vienna, and they are our artists in residence, and the museum's quarter is kind of like paying them a stipend, and they get a place to stay, like a studio slash apartment, and we can work with them. So, and last year we had a great friend of mine, Eric MacGyver, and he is a filmmaker that I actually met at Fantastic Fest last year,
ah,
because he attended the premiere of Masking Thresholds, and so we started talking, and we really liked each other, and I thought like, hey, would you like to come to Vienna for a month and be our artist in residence? And he agreed, and then he came, and we spent a great time together. And one of the things that he asked me to do is to give him a list of films from Austria of the last 20 years, so kind of like the recent Austrian film history. And I was thinking, like, what films would that be? It's actually a pretty interesting question. So I made this list of 20 films for him, yeah? And some of those films I really like, and some of those films I really hate, or let's say I have a certain disdain for them. Let's call it that way. Yeah? And one of those films, and that is now directly connected to Razzennest, which is my new film, is there's one filmmaker who is at least in the Austrian scene of filmmakers very well known, but also internationally. So he has his premieres at Cannes Festival and stuff like that. So he's like internationally known. I mean, usually if you think about Austrian filmmakers, you think about Michael Haneke or like Ulrich Seidel and those guys. But there are a couple of people, and he's kind of like in the same realm. And his name is Nicolas Geierhalter. So Nicolas Geierhalter is his name. And he's doing a very specific kind of art house film. And it's very slow documentaries most of the time. Yeah, actually only documentaries. And there is never a soundtrack. There are never really most of the time, any people in the documentaries. For example, he did one film about food production, where you see like minutes and minutes of like food producing machines and machinery, or like he has this like drone shot where he moves a drone behind a tractor that is plowing a field, and it's an incredibly long shot. I don't know, like 3 minutes or something, just like you see plowing a field. So he's super interested in just like long shots, and everything is kind of, it's almost in a certain way like pathos laden and slow. And one of the films that I put on the list for my friend is called Homo Sapiens, and Homo Sapiens became somewhat the blueprint or the thing that I wanted to satirize or emulate in Razzennest. And it's this film, so Homo Sapiens is this film where he traveled around the world, and he had this like 1 minute shots. The camera is not moving, no panning or anything, just like static shots of rundown buildings. You see like a rundown shopping mall from the inside in the US, or you see a rundown convention hall in Yugoslavia, in former Yugoslavia, or you see, I don't know, like a rundown street near Fukushima where the nuclear accident happened, stuff like that. And it's called Homo Sapiens because he wants to reflect about what people do, but what will happen if people disappear, and all this like crumbling buildings and all that stuff. So it's a somewhat interesting film. But when I saw it in the cinema, I thought, why is this not a coffee table book? There's nothing ever moving, like and of course he wants it that way, and it's all good and fine. It's his way of making movies, and it's his style. And yeah, I remember there was this fun moment. We watched it in this like super big, on this super big screen in a cinema in Vienna. And there is this shot that I mentioned of this like rundown shopping mall. And there is this like puddle of water, and there's water dripping from the ceiling, but almost nothing moves. And it's going on and on and on, that shot. And at some point, a pigeon flies by, and people in the audience started clapping because something was moving. It's almost like a relief moment. My God, there's a pigeon flying by. And anyhow, but I put that film on the list for my friend because I thought it is a very specific kind of thing, and it's also a little bit also reflective of like a certain form of art house cinema, and a certain form of art house cinema that many people in Austria like. So there is also like there's funding money for that kind of stuff, and I think because I did that, and my brain dealt with the film and thinking about that became one of the elements for my my shower epiphany of Razzennest, because I thought, hey, why not doing a movie that's actually two movies at once? I mean, so and the story, I'm not sure how much I can spoil, but the idea is that you have there's one layer, the visual layer of the film is this kind of like, I would probably even call it pretentious. There is this pretentious art house movie about this rundown area in Austria called Rohrwald, and it's really not far from where I grew up. So this is really like 20 kilometers from the place that I grew up. And so that's why I know it very well. And I know the area, and I know the forest, and I know the rundown villages and all that stuff.
Did, did, did it call you, Johannes?
Yeah.
The place called to you when you were younger, when you found it?
Oh, well, let's call it that way. So because I grew up very close to it, of course, like in elementary school, and like in general, people talk about the history of a place or the history of the district. So it's in the same district as my hometown, and in general, the legends and the history of my hometown and around my hometown are not super exciting. I remember I got a book in elementary school with the legends of my home district, and I read them. And most of them, like 80% of them, were just like incredibly boring, you know. But there were a couple of things that I remember I found super fascinating, even like as a 9-year-old kid. And one of those things was, and still is, a place in the Rohrwald forest, which is called the Swedish holes or the Swedish caves. And they were really used in the 30 Years' War 300 years ago by the local peasants to flee. They're kind of like this like earthen caves or earthen stables where they're not very high. You can hardly stand in them, but people were hiding there from the invading Swedish army, because in the 30 Years' War, Austria was on the Catholic side, and Sweden was on the Protestant side, and so there was a lot of carnage and raping and pillaging and everything, and so many peasants tried to flee from the villages to hide somewhere. And so I remember learning about that story of like these like small caves where people were hiding from the Swedes. And I mean, it's kind of weird because nowadays, if we think about the Swedes, we think about good healthcare and stuff like that. Back then,
Yeah.
they were kind of like a superpower, and so, and that the Swedes actually invaded Austria was also very strange for me as a kid. And there's also this castle called Castle Kreuzenstein, and the Swedes blew it up, and then they rebuilt it in the 1800s. And so there are a couple of things connected to that Rohrwald region that I always found super fascinating. And that's pretty much like the second thing that came into my mind when I thought like, hey, maybe I should do something about art house films, or like a satire of art house films. And maybe I could connect that to that Rohrwald region and the history of that Rohrwald region. And then I have like two components already that I would like to put together. And so yeah, and that led to the next step, that I thought, hey, why not doing a film that where the visuals are not really connected to what's going on the audio level. So what you hear is not necessarily connected, at least for a certain time, to what's going on the visual layer. So the visual layer is this art house film, this whatever it is, and the audio layer is the audio commentary track. And I thought that might be a good idea to have a story told pretty much as an audio play inside a film. So where the basic idea is that you have the kind of asshole director of the fictitious art house film being interviewed to create an audio commentary track for the Blu-ray or the DVD or whatever it is. And so the director is interviewed by a journalist in this LA sound studio, and he's accompanied by his camera guy and his producer. So you have this conversation between the camera guy, the producer, the director, and the interviewer who guides through the process and wants to create a good audio commentary track about the film. And so for me, it was kind of was interesting way of like on the one hand making fun about like art house films, but also making fun about the movie scene or the indie film scene in general. So it's definitely a form of satire. But
Mm.
at the same time, I wanted to do more than that. So I thought like, hey, maybe the satire about audio commentaries and about filmmaking could move or morph into something different. Uh, and that will actually happen. So it is a horror film. It is a horror
Mm.
comedy, I would call it. But after half an hour or something like that, I'm not sure how much I should spoil. But after
Yeah,
half an
no,
hour,
definitely don't spoil it, because
yeah, yeah,
the way it unfolds, right? Because here's the thing, Ines, right? The
mhm,
visuals are interesting, right? They are interesting, but the way you then frame it with this commentary track, because it feels like, right, you are kind of poking fun at pretentious, directors and things like that. But then also, you have this reviewer come in, and it's the thing that always gets me when sometimes you see films or you go to art galleries and you've heard the artist talk, and someone's like, oh, well, obviously they're talking about this, situation with life and death, and the director has said something completely different, but they're trying to put this thing on it, right?
yeah,
And you got the reviewer going, oh, but he's just like, no, what are you talking about? Did you watch the film? And that's just hilarious. There's so many times when hear people interview and you're just like, wait, have they watched the film? Like, what are they
yeah,
talking about? And so it was just, taking this look at the craziness of this whole industry, which was fun. And that was engaging. But then when you throw in that next thing, woo! Oh man, it was
yeah.
so
Because
much fun.
I thought like, I mean, I thought there has to be happening something more than that. So of course, I mean, you could probably not for 80 minutes or 81 minutes like I did it, but I think that you're right. The satire of reception of film or talking about film itself, like works. But I
Mm,
thought like I would like to level up. I would like to. Why not use the audio commentary track to actually have a plot, have something happen that's beyond the mere just like satire of audio commentary tracks. Just like use it almost like an audio play. Yeah, yeah. That's
mm,
what I try to do. Yeah, and of
yeah.
course I try to interweave that because uh, how the director talks about the film and what he wants it to be in the end becomes almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy that
Mm.
that happens afterwards. But I mean, you're right. We probably shouldn't do too much spoiling. But yeah,
Yeah, no, it was, just super fun, because with these things, I never read the synopsis beforehand or look at the trailers. I want to come in fresh. And
mhm.
so when you get to, watch something like this, oh man, going in with no information is so much fun, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah. I
I knew,
I
I
agree. Yeah.
knew I could do that after masking threshold, right? Because again, like AJ hit me up, right? And I look over these past few years, when AJ hits me, I know it's gonna be something pretty great, right? And so the fact that she introduced us with masking threshold, and that just being just so different, right? So different. So it was just, I cannot wait to see what Johannes has got. And this, man, I loved it. I
Yeah,
really,
I'm. It's fun because people, of course, because so many people loved Masking Threshold, and but Masking Threshold is also it is strange. It is on the one hand, it's completely different than Razzennest.
mm,
Just the tone is different because Razzennest is basically like a comedy or a satire, at least to a certain degree, and Masking Threshold has elements of black humor in it, but it's like a straightforward drama. Uh, and so Razzennest is like different just because it has a different tonality or is funnier, of course. But it definitely also shares kind of like a little bit of DNA, I would call it. And specifically, of course, that in Masking Threshold and in Razzennest, the audio element is incredibly important.
Yes.
So in Masking Threshold, all the noises and the tinnitus that you're hearing and glimpsing the inner monologue of the guy who goes insane. This is, of course, um, very spoken word driven, but at the same time there is a visceral element to Masking Threshold that's also gory, that is not present in Razzennest. But I try to be spooky in a different way with Razzennest, because uh, I can say that, of course, the layer of the audio commentary track and the layer of the visuals of the art house film, they're of course two completely different layers. But at the same time, and people can think about it whatever they want to interpret, uh, how they want to read it or see it. Uh, the audio layer and the visual layer in Razzennest, at a certain point, they start interfering, or they start uh, like not exactly completely hooking up, but there are moments when you think, okay, there is something going on between the visuals and the
Mm,
audio layer, but it's
yeah.
not that obvious. It's not that straightforward. Yeah.
Mm. And I think the other thing about both of these, right? You've done something that we don't usually see or we've not seen, right? Because, and that's it's not because you're right in front of me right now, but I honestly hadn't seen anything like Threshold, and I haven't seen anything like Razzennest. Right? These feel like completely unique visions, which there is just this joy in out being able to see something unique, something different, right? Because we so many times we see someone's version of the meet cute, right? Someone's version of the monster horror, right? Which there's nothing wrong with that. And seeing someone else's interpretation of something often gives us something really, like when you look at Alien being psychological and then Aliens being an action movie.
Yeah.
So great. Both films are fantastic, but so different, right? So that's great. But when you see something completely different, right, it blows people. Like when people saw the Blair Witch, it was just like, yo, what? When Cloverfield, there's certain films that just made people go, yo, the
Yeah.
first Jaws, the Thing, right? All of these different things that were kind of the first of their kind, right? There's a greatness of that, and these two films, right? It feels
Yeah.
like you've
I'm
done the same thing.
I don't know how to handle this compliment. This is like you're putting me in the same category as all these like enormously great and wonderful films. Thank you so much.
Oh, but it is so different, right? It is so different. So it's just like either your shower does something completely different than anyone else's. Because if that shower made you think of this, it's just like, yo.
I could rent out the shower for a lot of money. For like, you want to get inspiration? Get in my shower. There it is. Oh, by the way, here in the back, that's the cross from Razzennest,
I
from the
wonder.
from
Yeah.
the from the final scene in the very end. And so for all the people who have not seen it yet, it won't do any spoiling for you. But I have to say that this, like in this end scene, there is this cross, and I actually made it, because that like place of pilgrimage doesn't really exist in real life. So I made it up. So I had to make a cross for it, and it took me, it was a really good job. For like a whole day I was like thinking like, how can I make a cross and how does it look. It was a really like hands-on, I was my own props department, and I'm very happy with how the cross worked out.
So yeah, because I know you were making a lot of the stuff with Threshold. So you know, once again, you're back in the studio making stuff.
Yeah. Oh, I'm very happy. The thing is, that because of Masking Threshold last year, I had a couple of really cool conversations, also with big players in the industry. So I had a couple of super interesting Zoom conversations, and there are a couple of people and studios interested in what I'm doing, and they want to read my scripts. And of course, you never know what will happen out of that. But it was also for me, Razzennest was such a contained movie because I had the idea, I could write it myself. Uh, I called Flo and two of his friends, Feline and Ronald, uh, and we went to the Rohrwald region for 3-4 days. We shot there, so it was a super short shot, and then we were in the audio studio for the voiceover, the audio commentary track for probably like 2 days or something like that with my actors, and uh, then there was a little bit of audio editing, and then I was pretty much like sitting alone in my room and editing the film. So it was very contained. We were a crew of like 10 people or something like that, all in all. And that makes it so great for me and easy to kind of like control my vision, because the very
Mm,
moment I saw that when I had my conversations with the studios, the very moment you have people or a lot of more money involved in the production. So it's of course great. Everyone wants that. Of course, I want a good production value and good money for making a great film. Uh, but at the same time, of course, you kind of like give up certain ideas that are not feasible in that kind of environment. For example, so if I would have pitched Razzennest to any of those guys, they would have said like, that sounds great, but we can't do that. This does no, great idea, but not no thank you. Yeah. So so it was great to kind of like do something. I wouldn't even say quick and dirty, but it was something that was I had an idea, I could pull it through. I'm very happy with it, and it wouldn't have happened in any other way. I would say,
mm,
like at the very moment, the same thing happened with Masking Threshold. If I would have gone to a producer, or even in Austria, went through the whole rigmarole of like going to the big funding institutions and having the script checked, people would have said to me, no, you can't do a film that's like 70% macro shots and you never see the face of the protagonist. That's
mm,
not how it's done. And so Masking Threshold and Razzennest, both, they came out of a certain, let's call it the luxury of not having one sitting there and breathing down my neck and telling me what to do and how you should do a movie and how not.
yeah.
And I see that because at the moment I'm working on a couple of scripts, and I have a lot of dramaturgs and I have people giving me feedback all the time. And it's interesting to see that then they say like, why are you doing this? This is just like, and I find it incredibly hilarious and great. And it's one of the great elements of the film. And the first thing they do is like, they cut it out, like, that's not, that we can't do that, this is weird. And it's like, oh my god, I I would like to do a weird film with a big budget, but it will probably never happen.
Yeah, it's having to get people to buy the vision. That can be difficult at times.
Yeah, because
Now,
sometimes it's hard, because you have it in your, yeah. Same thing with Razzennest. So I have a couple of friends who I can just call and say, hey, I have this crazy idea, do you have like $1,000 for me or so, or two, because I know they have good IT jobs or something like that. So it's easy for them to
mm,
just like give me a little bit of, micro Kickstarter, for me. And of course, I got a little bit of funding money for Razzennest as well, from the city of Vienna. But I remember this one guy who used to give me kind of like 2 or 3 thousand euros or something like that for films. I told him about Razzennest, and he said like, I don't I don't know. I cannot envision how it looks like. It might, I don't know. This time you get $1,000, you know. And I thought like, oh my God. And it was so clear in my mind. And so it's strange. I think that Razzennest was is super close to what I had in mind when I started working on it. But it's so hard to explain people how things will work out as a finished product if it's something
Mm,
that is kind of strange, or like kind of out there.
yes. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah. Now, when you were doing the film shoot, was it just Nutella for those 3 days?
No, 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 no. Inside joke for all the people who will watch my film. They will know uh, why you're asking me about Nutella. No, it was not Nutella, but close to.
Right. Okay.
But it's fun. I mean, part of the satire element of the film is that they are. I can pretty much tell that they are. They are hiring an Austrian camera guy they found on Facebook because they need an Austrian team member so they can apply for funding money in Austria, which is like one of these things that you kind of know when you make films. It's always so weird. You have to
Mm,
kind of like adapt, and sometimes certain movie grants have certain quota, so you have to have at least like two female uh, people in the crew and stuff like that. So there's all these like things that you have to do to get grant money. And I really wanted to put in there, and there is this, and the crazy kind of like asshole director of the film is always like shit talking the poor camera guy, who honestly, like, I mean, if it's only on the fictitious level because we had three camera guys uh, shooting for 3 days to make the film possible, yeah. But in the fictitious storyline, it's this one guy who shot all the footage for the entire film, and this is really quite something. If you see the film, doing that in 3 days alone
mm,
is quite something. And then you have this like stupid idiot director who is always criticizing him, and doesn't even want to pay him the plane ticket to the premiere. And and yeah, yes. But I have to say, like, I know people like that. I mean, if
mm,
you know people in the film scene, you also know many people who are not pleasant to work with. Yeah.
mm. When you wrote this, right?
Mhm.
Because there are those fun little bits in the conversation, about, oh, you gave me no direction. Be like, but you had you found the vision. I helped you, and it was
Yeah.
that whole craziness and stuff like that, right? Which is fun. It's great. It is so amusing to hear. But was there ever the kind of thinking of, I if I write this, maybe thingy thing might think it's about them, or
Oh,
is this too close to the bone?
oh, honestly, I hope that some people will see themselves. There are actually quotes of people I know, of people who said some of those things in interviews. So there are live quotes of other directors that I put in there. Just, yeah, and also very interesting. There's a connection between Masking Threshold and Razzennest. The thing is that uh, I got lots and lots of reviews of Razzennest, and I'm still knocking on wood. I'm still at 100% on Rotten Tomatoes,
Wow.
uh, but it's only like 10 reviews or something like that. At some point, someone will not like it, and then it won't be 100%. But I'm not that obsessive about it. But the thing is, so I had like around 50 or so reviews, and there were like only 2 or 3 reviews that were really, really negative, that really did not like or really kind of like attacked Masking Threshold. And there was one reviewer from Ireland who saw it online, and he was really asking, so how is this even a movie? why this is not a movie. It does not fulfill the criteria of a movie. It is just like an audio play or something. Or so he was really like attacking all the things that I specifically created or really found super interesting to do that as a movie. He hated it and attacked it. And there is actually a couple of quotes from that review in Razzennest, where the director in Razzennest kind of like says some of those lines in the review, because the whole thing is about that the director in Razzennest wants the audience to kind of like absorb the images, and so he doesn't want to explain anything. That's what connects him to this Geierhalter guy I was talking about. He doesn't want any commentary. He wants the images to speak for themselves. But of course, the images can never explain anything on that level that he intends to. So there is this, you just see like rundown farms, and he wants you to see the history of the 30 Years War and the history of war. So this is kind of like the pretentiousness that he thinks that everyone will see all these like things in the film, and no, people just see like, yeah, there's just like some chicken and a rundown farm. What is this? And at some point he says like that film is a visual medium. It is anyhow, like, and he talks about film as a visual medium, and that is pretty much like exactly from the bad review about Razzennest, where he complains that film is a visual medium and it should work as a visual medium and not so heavily depend on audio commentary and voiceover and stuff like that. And I thought, like, that's perfect. I mean, my next film is obviously again using audio as a very important level of the film, but at the same time, the film itself is pretty much like fulfilling what the reviewer wants. He wants a visually driven film, but that's also what I criticize. So I thought that it's fun to put it in there.
Yeah, no, definitely, right. That whole, it was so much fun. Just the whole audio track recording segment of the film.
I wonder what people will, because I mean the film is definitely also, I mean, I guess someone like you is definitely getting a kick out of it because you probably understand some of the references. You might know some of the directors I'm quoting or films that I'm referencing. That's like that's your daily bread, let's call it. I wonder what people think about the film, and we will see. I mean, not many people have seen the film so far because it didn't have a premiere yet. But I wonder what people will think about the film that don't know too much about the film scene, that don't know, that are not, like movie nerds, Will it still work for people who are not movie nerds? I mean, what do you think? Does it?
Yeah, I think it will, right? Because, as I said earlier, right, the amount of times I've gone to an art gallery, right, and you stand back and you hear people be like, right, I mean, obviously, you can see the artist having a mental breakdown in this picture, in the piece, and how they framed it. And then you'll read the blurb on the wall, and it's like, I created this in the happiest time of my life. And you know what I mean? The people will stand there and try, like, it's usually talking to one of their friends, and they'll be like, basically on a pulpit, preaching to them and going, oh, well, obviously, yes, you can see this, and oh, it means this. So I think, you know what I mean? If like whatever kind of background you're from, whether it's literature, art, there's always that thing, right? There's always that thing where people are trying to tell you it's this, or someone's going, no, the point of this is this, right? So I think you'll be able to understand what's going on, right? Even if you don't know some of the directors referenced or the films or that kind of thing, you still can understand the situation.
I like that. Sounds good. I'm happy. Oh yeah, yeah. Now we'll honestly, I mean, I'm in a very interesting, exciting moment right now because the premiere is in 2 weeks, and that's around also the time when the first reviews come in. There has not been a single review published yet, so I've not even seen any. So I'm just like waiting for someone to move and write something, and I'm of course very excited to see how people read it, decipher it, what they take out of it. Yeah, we'll see.
So is that always the kind of feeling at this point, like this anticipation, this hopefulness, like of what might come, the reception?
Sure, yeah, of course, and it's also, I mean, will people? I mean, to a certain degree, I'm not sure I can talk for all artists or all people who do creative work, but of course we do something to I wouldn't be so romantic to say like that we all want to be loved or something like that. But what definitely is true is that I think most artists want to do something because they want to evoke a certain reaction or a certain emotion. Or if people would come and say like, I mean, Razzennest was great, but the jokes were so bad I couldn't laugh. I would feel that I failed, like, uh, or if because I mean, like, I'm not sure we talked about that, but uh, during our last conversation, but I think that films are little machines, like little emotional machines, and you make them to do something in other people. You want to
Mm,
make them laugh. You want to make them scared. You wanna give them a perspective about something they probably haven't thought about. And of course, if that fails, if your goal, if your self set goal doesn't work out, and you read all the reviews and no one is actually seeing what you wanted them to see, then it's kind of hard, of course. I'm very happy that it didn't happen with Masking Threshold. And with Masking Threshold, I already had the feeling of like, Jesus, I it is exactly what I wanted it to be. But will anyone like this? you know? And I'm at the same point here with Razzennest. Same thing. I'm very happy with what I made, but I'm only one part of the story.
mm.
Yeah.
Well, I remember with Threshold, there was that difficulty of trying to submit it to festivals because people didn't know where to put it.
Yeah.
And it was you just needed someone to take that chance and show it, right? Which, thankfully some people did. Now,
Mhm.
is is it the same situation with this one, or is it because of the reception of the last film that you found that has opened up these doors for you now?
Oh, definitely. I think, especially in the horror film community and horror film genre festival space, people were super excited that I already sent them a new film. So, and I can't talk about it yet because they all have press embargoes. But I've already been accepted at least like four other festivals. And
Nice.
three of them are in the genre space, and one of them is an art house film festival, which is also great. Like, which makes me super happy that I make a satire of art house film, and an art house film festival screens it. That makes me super happy. But at the same time, of course, I wouldn't even say that Razzennest is entirely only a satire of art house film. In a certain way, it's also a satire of certain genre tropes. Uh,
Mm.
but and then of course it tries to take that and put it into a completely different direction, where at the end it's not really a satire of anything anymore. It's just like its own story that unfolds. So, but yeah, I mean, it is definitely that I'm in the mind space of like, oh my.
Oh man. Well, yeah, no, that I think the thing of it, right? Though you've essentially, created an art house film as the vehicle for what we have, like in the conversation, it's I kind of feel it's more general, right? Like it could be any type of film, like
Yeah,
because that type of director trying to take credit for everything and not wanting to, what I mean? Like
yeah,
you have that across the board,
yeah,
and then with
yeah,
the reviewer again, right? You have that type of person all over the place who's saying things that don't really make any sense or wants to sound profound when they haven't really said
yeah.
anything. And
And
then,
it's also kind of like I wanted to incorporate that element that she's a fangirl of the director and realizes that he's a complete asshole,
mm,
you
yeah,
know, and yeah, no, it's fun. But I have to say, I'm super excited with all like how the whole uh, like the performance uh, turn out to be because. Uh, there's some actors in the film that I've been working for a long time. For example, that guy. Actually, here I have it here. That's actually a prop from Masking Threshold.
ah,
That's the dad because in Masking Threshold he has this abusive dad, and
mm,
and that's the prop of the picture of the abusive dad in Masking Threshold. That's a good friend of mine, Roland. I'm working with him. He's part of our art group since 2006. So we do theater plays together. We write scripts together. So he's an old and dear friend, and I casted him as the Austrian camera guy. And he says I typecasted him because he is able to make this like horrible grunting noises of like and it is true, it is true, he has this like guttural, like so I'm not telling you why that is important, but it is important in the film. So I immediately knew I he's the guy for the camera guy. And I also knew uh, that I needed Michael, and Michael Smulik is the actor who plays the director. And he is from South Africa. He lives in Austria for like, I don't know, like 25 years or something like that. But he grew up in South Africa. He knows the scene there. He has still the South African accent if he wants to speak in English. So that was great. And also he's just like I saw him in a couple of theater plays and performances where he plays the bad guy or where he plays like some unpleasant character. And I thought like, that's great. I need a guy from South Africa who can play an unpleasant South African guy. So Michael was cast, and I'm also very happy with him. And the cool thing is that all the other performers, I worked with the guy who plays the sound technician before, Jim Libby. He's also yeah, he's also like in connection with that guy, also very important in the film. And so I've worked with him before for an audio recording, so I knew he's good. Uh, but all of those guys, like Michael and Jim, uh, they are part of this improv theater group in Vienna called English Lovers.
right.
And I didn't work with Sophia or Anne before, but I asked Michael and Jim, so do you have any recommendations for two actresses that could play the um, the interviewer and the producer? And they said, like, yeah, of course, we have to ask Sophia and we have to ask Anne. And I completely trusted them, and I knew they are working together for many years, so they are kind of like a team. They just and some of the stuff in the film is improvised, even. So it's
Okay.
so yeah, and it's some of the reactions and some of the things I thought like perfect. And so I had this kind of like very well working group of four people, and my friend Rolly that I work together with all the time, and which also worked perfect because Rolly is also the outsider in the group because he is the Austrian camera guy they just hired for the grant money, and he's in the film also the outsider that no one really likes. So I thought that's perfect having like the four guys who work together all the time plus my Rolly, and I'm happy with my decision.
Oh man, yeah, the cast are great because that is the big thing with this, right? It only really works if you have the right voice cast, and everyone has to be able to deliver. It can't, if it's just a great director performance, it's
Mm-hmm.
still not going to work, right?
Yeah,
Because everyone has to play off of each other.
yeah.
So it's all of that just comes together really well to really just give this film that next level, right? So yeah, great job with the casting.
I'm very happy that you think so, and I know you watch a lot of films, so I take that as a compliment.
Yeah,
But
no.
it's interesting. A question for you,
Mhm.
because you watch so many films, also many indie films. Uh, uh, is it for you always clear from the very beginning in the film that, for example, that you don't like the performance of a certain character, or do you also see films where some like a character an actor kind of like has a low start and really gets going and has a great finish or something like that, or is it usually very consistent when you see like, nah, that guy can't act, and or does that change sometimes?
It does change, right?
Mm-hmm,
It can definitely change. I think sometimes it depends on you coming into the film,
mm-hmm,
right? Because if it's just been a crazy day and you're just tired, right? Sometimes you come in a certain mood and you can just be like, ugh, like this ain't working. What's going on with the film? But then after you've kind of, it's been like 15, 20 minutes, now you're into the flow of it and you're just like, oh, right, I see what's happening here. Right.
mm-hmm.
There's sometimes when you watch a film and you're like, what, what's going on with that person? Like,
Yeah,
that's just everyone else is great, but that's such a weird performance.
yeah,
And then, like, as the film unfolds, you find out something about the character, and be like, oh, of
mhm,
course they're gonna be like that because that fits in with, you know what I mean? So it really depends. Like sometimes, yeah, you will hate someone out the gate. You just be like, oh, I hate that character. But as the film unfolds, you kind of like, oh, I really. It's like have you seen Memento?
mhm,
Right?
mhm.
And in fact, I remember watching Memento and you feel bad for Guy Pearce's character. You'd be like, oh my God, I can't believe it. This must be so difficult. And as the film goes on, you realize what kind of person is. You're like, what a shit. Wow, I can't believe I felt bad for that guy. Fuck that guy. You know what I mean? So I think that's the great thing about storytelling and the
Yeah,
way that, there's times and yeah, you can love someone, hate them, you can be indifferent, but then they become the hero of the piece.
yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
it really can depend, but then also, right, it's down to that actor being able to give us that kind of performance and really kind of temper it in that way. But then you've got like the director and the screenwriter being able to create that ambience for the person to be able to do what they're doing, right?
mhm,
So
mhm.
yeah, there's so many components of this, right?
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
definitely things films where it just doesn't work. It
yeah.
doesn't work at all, right?
Sometimes I feel so strange because there are some films where so many critics seem to have the same perspective on it. So
Mm,
uh, so sometimes I guess it's also kind of like almost like a mass phenomenon that everyone is now hating on one specific film or something like that. But there are so many films that I know where the general consensus seems to be it's a bad film, but I really like it. Or sometimes there are uh, sometimes specific performances of actors or actresses are kind of like singled out as specifically bad in a film or something like that. And I
Mm,
watch the film and I see like I don't get why everyone is hating on on that performance. So I don't get it. And sometimes I feel like don't I just see it? I why do I
mm.
not see it? But I don't know. It's just like, I mean, I guess especially about film, it's all so subjective. And so you said yourself, like sometimes you're just in a bad mood, but strange. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there is a hive mind at times, right? So there's certain reviewers, right, who are very big and they will talk about a film in a certain way, and then suddenly, right, they have callings to the show, and everyone now is saying the same thing, right? They're like, there's people that hate Michael Bay, right? They say
Yeah.
Michael Bay is a terrible director. I'm like, I love The Rock. I think The
Yeah.
Rock is great. Con Air is great. Michael Bay also is the producer of a really great film, Remember the Titans,
Ah,
right? It's a
yes. Yes. Yeah.
college basketball, American football film. It's fantastic. He's the producer on that film. Michael Bay is not a shit director, right?
No,
You
no.
might not enjoy all the things
Yeah.
he's done, but he's done some really good things, right? And
Yeah,
even
absolutely, absolutely. And I
yeah,
mean, I think he exactly knows what he wants. I mean,
mm,
he is creating. He is like. I think at some point you can debate if a film is bad when a director tries to do something and fails in doing that, or like
mm,
if for example, yeah, if you make a comedy and it's not humorous, then maybe there's something wrong, probably. Yeah. But Michael Bay films, they are what they are. Like he wants, they're fun, they're loud, they are bombastic, and
mm.
he always delivers. So there's no complaint here.
I didn't like the I thought the first Transformer film was fun, right? There's nostalgia. It's just
Yeah,
remember Transformers as a kid and seeing these things actually come to life, as it were. That was fun. The other films I didn't enjoy,
yeah.
right?
But that's
But
also the entire problem of like just like milking a cow until
yeah,
she dies or something.
mm,
I don't know. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
But there's a load of people that did enjoy them, right? And every film doesn't have to be for me,
yeah,
right? That's the big thing. Like, there's so many films that I enjoy. So I'm like, if that's not for me, fine. You know what I mean? But I think you can always talk about things. Like, what I try and do with this is, even if I don't like something, right? Unless it's completely offensive,
mhm,
right? And offensive in, like, oh man, there was a film and the way it, like, they talked about race in a certain way, and
mhm.
it just pissed me. I was just like, what the fuck are you doing, right?
Yeah,
But it says, offensive. That that's what I mean with that. If it's like trying to, if it talks about a subject in a way that's just so just off key, right? That will piss me off, and I will say it. But otherwise, there's usually an element of the film that I kind of feel like, man, I love the cinematography of that film, or the soundtrack was crazy. The way it really invoked these emotions, or there's certain performances that really work. And then, you know what I mean? I like to go, look, it wasn't for me, but if you enjoyed this film and this film, I think this will connect with you,
yeah.
right? Because I
And
just feel, you spend so much time in creating these things. You know what I mean? It's just like, I think people see a 90-minute film, a 2-hour film, or whatever length, and think, oh, that was it, right? But they don't think of the months of pre and post production,
yeah,
right? The casting process, the location hunts, you know what I mean? Just all of those other things. They don't think about that. And I'm very conscious that, you mean, people have spent all this time, and regardless of if I like it or if I don't, that person had the courage to create something and put it out there for people
oh
to.
yeah. the 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 existence of a film, just itself, like not even talking about the quality, whatever it is. Sometimes it's just secondary that there is that a person made a film, you know,
Mm.
is is a wonder by itself.
Yes.
So many things can go wrong. It's just like it's a creating a film, something as dense as like an 80-minute, 90-minute film. It takes such an enormous amount of time. I mean, I worked pretty much like for 5 months straight, nothing but making Razzennest, you know, because I didn't have any other big projects to do, so I could focus on that. But
Mm.
that was really like occupying my mind and planning and doing for 5 months straight. And and there's so many people who say like, "Ah, my God, that's a bad film," and blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, it exists. It's a testament of fighting entropy. You know,
Mm.
it is like out of nowhere something. You know, and that by itself is just like an enormous. Uh, it's a it's a medal by itself. Having
Oh,
done that,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And you know, having the opportunity to have these sort of conversations with so many different like actors, actresses, directors, producers, writers, cinematographers, right? It is fascinating.
yeah.
Everyone's got a different process, right? But the big thing that always just really comes through is the effort and the love that everyone is putting into this, right? So for you to come along and just completely shit on it, right? And I mean, not enjoying something is fine, but to be malicious,
Yeah, yeah.
right? That's the thing that I find weird. Though, and you know, I've listened to a
It's
lot of.
disrespect. It is disrespectful. Like you can
Mm,
enjoy something or not, but it's disrespectful of other people's um, effort. Let's
yeah,
call it. Yeah,
yeah, and you know, it's easy to sit on the sidelines and be like, I would have done this, and oh, I can't believe they did that. It'd be like, but what have you done,
yeah,
right? They got up and made something. What have you done,
yeah.
right? That's the big
I
thing,
think
you
it's
know.
a side effect that films are such a really like if there are only a few real mass media and film is one of them because uh, I mean I've been doing lots of artworks and work in the art field and exhibitions and all kinds of stuff. And I always quote my mom. My mom never came to one of my exhibitions, my gallery exhibitions, because she always said, "I don't know what to wear." You know, there is this like boundary of like, I don't want to go into the gallery because I don't know. That's a weird space,
Mm, mm,
and I'm kind of addressing that also with Razzennest a little bit, but in general, there is there is this kind of like strange force field around fine arts or certain elitist forms of art.
mm,
And I always hated that. I always wanted to do something that people can easily approach. And with films, the great thing is nobody needs an introduction to a film. Nobody needs to read the uh, uh, the sideline, you know, like the description or something like that. A film is like by itself a working entity, you know, and I think that is a great thing. I think that it is truly something that everyone everywhere can just like watch a movie and have an opinion about it, or it doesn't create any barriers. It's
mm,
just like maybe language, but then you also can have dubbing or subtitles or something like that. But I think, but because of that, because it's such a ubiquitous present thing that everyone has a relationship, everyone has favorite films, you know. It's also something that where people try to forget because it's everywhere and we're surrounded by it all the time. That people forget how much work there is in it.
mm.
They forget that it's an art form because
Yeah,
it is so popular. But it is an art form, and there is no difference if Michael Bay makes a film or I make a film, we are both creating an artwork. Like he has a better lawyer than I have probably, but, and better contracts, but still, it's the same thing.
Mm. Well, yeah, I think like when you see all of the, new films dropping on Netflix, Prime, Disney, weekly, right? It was there's, like when everything locked down during the pandemic, right? There was still films coming out. So I think a lot of times people just think, oh, it doesn't take that long,
Yeah,
right? Things, you can just, and you definitely notice that when similar films come out at the same time, right? Remember when like Armageddon came out, and then you had oh god, I can't think of the name of the goddamn film, but there was that other film very similar.
oh yeah, Deep Impact.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Johannes. And there was a time, I think, when two Snow White films came out around the same time, and I think there was two Robin Hood films that came
Yeah,
out around the same. And people think, oh, one person saw it, and then the other one kind of wanted to make the same film. And you're like, no, that's not what happens, right? It takes so long to
and I
get.
mean, Armageddon and Deep Impact are completely different films. The only
Mm,
thing that is the same is that there is like an asteroid
yeah.
impact, or almost, or in one it is, in the other not. Yeah, I don't know,
Yeah.
but yeah.
But
Yeah,
yeah, so I think people, have this thing that films are quick and simple, right? But it's,
yeah,
like these conversations help you understand everything that goes into it, right? So you just want to be able to, give someone the opportunity to really talk about all of that, right? Everything that they poured into this thing, and people to understand that, this film was this, labor of love that is now out there. And, love it or hate it, it's there. And it's, interesting that it's there.
yeah. And we cannot forget that most of the most beloved films of film history were all, like box office like
Mm,
meltdowns, like failures, like Blade Runner. Nobody wanted to see it. The Thing, one of the best horror films of all times, The Thing almost destroyed John Carpenter's career.
mm,
It's just, because it was so far out there and people didn't know how to deal with it, and sometimes it's also like, I mean, if you're competing with like ET in the same year, in the same segment of fantastic films, I mean, of course you kind of lose against ET because it was such a big thing back then.
mm,
And but at the same, yeah, we cannot like, some of the best films ever were not received with open arms, and over the years, because of VHS tapes or whatever, they became classics. And so I wonder what are the films of the last 5 years that flopped and will be the classics of the future.
yeah. But I remember, John Carter when that came out,
Yeah,
and it didn't make a lot of money,
yeah,
right? But I remember when I watched John Carter, I really enjoyed John Carter,
yeah,
right? I do like the pulpiness of Edgar Burrow, right?
right,
Rice,
yeah, yeah,
but I think the thing that failed John Carter was the marketing for it, right? They spent a load of money on marketing,
yeah,
but it was all just didn't really tell you anything. And the fact is, sometimes you don't need to tell someone this happens and this happens and this happens, but create an interest, like some intrigue, and it didn't do that. So then no one really gave a damn about the film. So I'm kind of curious that if over the years people will look at John Carter differently, right? And just
when
watch
how,
for what
how
it is.
long is when was John Carter released? Is this like 15 years, 10, some
Ooh, I think maybe 10 years.
10 years? Okay. I'm really bad at some of that stuff. Sometimes I know exactly when something came out, but John Carter, no idea, no
Yeah.
idea.
Well, I thought we spoke in 2020, so you cannot trust my memory, Johannes.
Yeah.
Oh
Nice.
man. Hey, so hey, and this is the thing. When we were talking about threshold, yeah, I didn't know that this was coming, right? So
Yeah, I remember. I think we talked about uh, next time you do something, let me know.
yeah,
And
you
I
didn't.
honestly also did not expect that it would be that fast, that I would knock on the door again through AJ.
So yeah, so I think the question is there anything else? Like are we going to be talking
Well,
5 months? Like
there is, I mean, there will be a film coming out pretty soon because I'm already working on it for a couple of years. So
right.
there's a documentary. It's not fiction. It's a documentary, and it will probably be done by February next year, March next year, something like that. So, and then I also don't know uh, because this is also different now because it's a documentary. Uh, I'm submitting it, of course, like to different film festivals because
Hmm.
documentary film festivals are a completely different realm than genre film festivals. And so I have no idea like how long it will take, if who will be interested in seeing that. But it's a very nerdy uh, documentary because the backstory is I can give you a brief. It's probably not an elevator pitch, but it's a short pitch. It's a friend of mine lives in the small town in Colorado called Durango. It's like a western cowboy town that is living off the western past of the region, and there are lots of tourists coming there, and there are like cowboy shows and stuff like that. So it's called Durango, Colorado, in southwestern Colorado, and my friend lives there, and he started a couple of years ago a hackerspace, makerspace, where people can learn soldering and like this, like a little like nerd tinker space.
Hmm.
And when the whole COVID thing started, he suddenly posted a lot of images of many people working in the co-working space. And so what happened was that the hospitals in the area were completely overwhelmed with COVID patients. And so they needed equipment, especially specific kind of masks and pepper systems for like that the doctors could talk almost like ventilation systems for doctors so they can talk to patients but also have are secure from the virus and stuff like that. And because they didn't have any equipment, they asked the hackerspace, can you help us with creating equipment for us? And
Oh,
so that hackerspace was one of the first hackerspaces on the planet to make medical equipment for the hospitals, and they saved a lot of lives. So it's kind of like the story of like hackerspaces, do-it-yourself movement, but also of COVID and that specific region.
mm,
Because the question is like, I mean, there are like 40,000 people living in Durango. There are probably 50,000 people living in Farmington, which is like an hour south of Durango. And they were all like, and both hospitals were completely overrun by patients. And I asked, so where are all the people coming from? You're a very secluded area, like there's not that. I mean, why so many patients? And
mm.
then he told me a big part of the patients are coming from Navajo Nation,
Uh,
uh, and they have lots of like diabetes there, and the
yeah.
health situation is bad. And then I got interested, and that might be an interesting story because it's not only a story about COVID and hacker spaces and making equipment, but it's also pretty much the story of America and colonialism, and why are there reservations, and why are the living conditions and the social conditions in reservations so bad. So it's kind of like
Yeah.
it's like three stories in one that kind of like converge to one story. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. The health inequality, right? That there's something that in my last role, yeah, we were working a lot around that because there's marginalized groups and things like that, but also the way certain services are promoted and pushed out,
Mhm.
it's not always very fair,
No,
right? So
no,
then you don't necessarily know it until something crazy like a pandemic or something like that happens. Then you
exactly.
can really see
Finally
how
saw the fault
this is
lines of,
played
the
out.
system where it's not working. And I
Mm,
mean, you're UK based. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Fault lines in the system.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, for sure, man. Oh shit. Yeah, no, that'd be interesting, man.
I'll definitely let you see it.
Okay. Okay. I'm looking forward. Now,
Absolutely, absolutely.
is there dialogue or is it just visuals telling the story?
Oh, it is a lot of dialogue. It is a lot of dialogue. I'm kind of like starring in it because I realized that there are so many components and so many stories that are kind of like complex, and you need to tell them in an entertaining way. So I'm almost it's not exactly me, but there is someone in the film that looks like me, that is kind of like the narrator, or like the host of the show that keeps it all together.
Mm,
Because I realized uh, I don't get all the information that I need to tell out of the interviews because it's so complex, and I don't want to write things down for people I interview. Could you say this line because I need this
yeah.
line? It doesn't work that way. So I thought like, hey, maybe I should play this like strange, almost fictitious character that is leading through the story and can make commentaries and can introduce people and tell stories that can be told like in 3 4 sentences, but
Mm,
but but it would be kind of like, where do I get all that stuff? So that's it works out pretty well. It's fun because you almost never see my face because I'm wearing this like yellow hazmat suit, so you
ah.
only see my eyes, and I'm wearing this hazmat suit and walking around as this like narrator character, but it's definitely me. I mean, it is me, but it's also not me.
Uh-huh. See, now if a big studio was funding that, it would be like, we need you to take the helmet off at some point. We can't pay you all this money and not have people see and know it's you. So you got to take the helmet off, Johannes.
Horrible, horrible.
Oh man. Well, I think the interesting thing about that is that will be another, you know, new type of storytelling that we're seeing from you.
Well,
Manifest is fun.
it is close to. I think I never told you about that, but I did 2 documentaries before that are very unconventional. So I did this one documentary about nerd culture. It's almost like a road trip through the U.S. where I talk to other nerdy people and nerdy characters, and that is also very experimental. And I did another film called Glossary of Broken Dreams, which is also a very essayistic documentary where I have like puppets in them, and so it's almost like it's a documentary where I try to explain the most important political terms at the moment. So I try to explain because people don't know. Everyone is like, I hate capitalism, but
Mm,
most people don't even know what capitalism is. Or
yeah,
people talk about resistance, or they talk about privacy. And so I'm trying to explain those, like, for me, the most important terms in current political discourse. I'm trying to explain them. It's almost like uh, 10 or 11 short stories, and they all have a different aesthetics. So for example, I'm talking about resistance and activism, and it's almost like a puppet show where puppets explain what's going on. And then
uh-huh,
there is one segment that looks like a Japanese anime, like a manga style
mm.
thing, when I'm talking about the media and the power of the media. So it's a documentary, but at the same time, it's also not, because it's my opinion and I'm presenting it in a certain way. But I should send you a link to that. You should check it out.
Oh, yeah, no, it sounds fascinating. Now,
Yeah.
where can people find this stuff though, man?
So
Let people.
actually, Trace Route, that's the name of the nerd documentary, and Glossary of Broken Dreams. They are. I made the first one was released in 2016, and the second one in 2018, and they are both on Vimeo. So you
Ah,
can actually go to Vimeo, and I think you can buy it there for $4 or something like that. So that's easy to find.
splendid, splendid. And how can people find you, Johannes?
With my stupidly long German name, and I'm the only person with that stupidly long German name that is here. There it is. If they just Google me, they'll find me. So uh, it's hard to miss me on Google search.
Oh man, fantastic. This has been another great conversation, man. It really
Thank
has.
you so much for having me, and hope to see you again soon. And well, what can I say? I'm following your podcast, so I'm looking forward to seeing more of your great conversations.
Ah, thank you, man. I really appreciate that. Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. And hey, anyone in your collective, if they want to, or just let me know, man. Let me know. It'll be a pleasure to talk. So,
Absolutely, we'll do so. Thank
okay.
you so much.
Yes. So, people, right? Definitely go check out the film. Go definitely check out the film. So you're at Fright Fest.
So first, Fantastic Fest is the first one.
Fantastic Fest.
And Fantastic Fest is the only one I'm at the moment allowed to talk about. So,
Okay.
but that is really soon. That is, I'm not sure when you are airing the program, but Fantastic Fest, the virtual release of the film will be on the 29th of September, 2022. So that
Boom.
is pretty soon. Yeah.
Okay, you heard it, people. Go check it out. Follow Johannes. He's on Twitter, he's on Instagram, Facebook. All the links will be in on the website. So go check Johannes, and you will be able to then find out when the film is dropping in a spot near you. Okay.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I hope at some point like in the UK, of course, and hopefully everywhere else.
Mm,
Let's see. Knock
yes.
on wood. Okay.
Well, Johannes, another pleasure. Thank you very much. And hey, congrats on another great film.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right, man. Looking forward to talk about the documentary in a couple of months.
Let's see. Let's see. I'm not jinxing it.
All right, man. You take it easy, okay?
Bye bye. You too.
All
Bye
right.
bye.
Bye.